We continue our Colorado shooting coverage this morning. Police now have a suspect in custody. He's 24-year-old James Holmes. We're told he had no criminal record, just one traffic ticket. And this morning, we're all trying to make sense of this. Valley psychiatrist Dr. Yasinski joins us now to help us gain a better understanding of how something might lead up to what happened overnight.
All right, doesn't make much sense, does it?
No.
So what I want to start with is just to kind of reassure people that I think there's enough evidence here, and I've heard comments from the law enforcement that this is not consistent with any act of terrorism. The way it was carried out, well planned, was not consistent with someone that is performing an act of terror. So I don't want people to be frightened and
wondering if that's what it is. And
exactly.
You say well planned. If you're just now joining us, we've heard reports that police went to his apartment complex. It had to be evacuated overnight. When they went to the complex, they learned that his apartment had been booby-trapped.
Right.
In fact, one of the statements was made that they found buckets of ammunition. And you say that this actually could be a sign of early stages of psychosis?
Right. So most consistently, looking at his picture, we've kind of heard a little bit about the last year of his life. No real history prior to that, and he actually became much more isolative over the last year or so. He dropped out of medical school. He lived in the back of an apartment complex where none of his neighbors seemed to recognize him. And this social isolation is usually what leads up to what we call a first break psychotic illness, which is in your early 20s for males. They can become delusional, paranoid, and have things like auditory hallucinations commanding them to do something pretty crazy that doesn't make sense to us, but in their mind, they're out of touch with reality, and to them, it makes sense. So this is one of those situations that none of us understand, but in his mind, he probably had a goal, he had a sense of accomplishment, and that's why he presented out in a calm fashion to police, wasn't fighting, wasn't saying anything, almost like he had achieved his goal. And then on top of that, the booby traps in the house really speak to the level of paranoia that you just don't see in someone who's just a violent person otherwise, or a terrorism act. You don't usually see the level of paranoia that he was displaying. So I think it's most consistent with a psychotic illness, like schizophrenia.
He had dropped out of medical school. I mean, was planning to be a neurosurgeon, is what I've read this morning.
And that's what's really sad. That's a very common presentation we see all the time.
Really?
Is a very high-functioning person with no history of mental illness, sometimes a family history.
Something causes them to snap.
And college age for males, especially that early 20s, they just begin to, they're off the radar, their family doesn't see them anymore, they're isolating, they drop out of school and work, and usually they end up in the hospital for being super delusional or paranoid. In this case, much more rare is for someone to do anything of this nature violent-wise, but it is not unheard of.
Let's say hypothetically, and this will be my last question,
Sure.
but if we have someone watching this morning and you're talking about some of these things, and they have someone in their lives who they might be a little worried about, what can we do to help these people before they might break?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to watch for is watch if your friends or family seem to drop off the radar in terms of...
Can't find them, they're not talking.
Yeah, I mean, they're just not as social anymore. Yeah. If not a symptom for this, it's usually a symptom of a psychiatric problem, and you really want to get them some help. That isolation occurs in almost all of these cases. So not that this is clearly preventable, but with close watch of friends and family, it definitely can be picked up that there might be something going on.
All right, Dr. Yasinski, thank you for joining us on such short notice.
Sure.
Very interesting. Was reading one account this morning where his mother had learned of this information from a reporter, April, and apparently she looked right at that reporter and said, yes, you have the right person. I need to get out to Colorado. So according to this account, it sounds as though there were some of these warning signs, unfortunately.
Wow.